Mike Cannell here with Orcas Island Leather Goods, and today we're going to assemble the Doe Bay Bifold wallet. It has 4 card pockets, a large billfold pocket, and an inside pocket on each side. Included in your kit, you'll find an outside main piece of bridle leather, your inside main piece, left side card pockets, right side card pockets, a spool of thread, 2 needles, an edge finishing kit, and from home you'll need a pair of scissors or something to cut the thread, a lighter, and a pair of pliers comes in handy. The first thing we're going to assemble are the stops for the upper card holder pockets. There are 2 of these and the pieces are side specific. Pick up the left side half piece, which has the square corners on the right hand side, and the card pocket whose top edge is lower on the right hand side. We will be stitching these 4 holes first, and you'll need about 12 inches of thread for each stitch line. Align your stitching holes and let's get started. I'm using a stitching pony to hold the leather, and this is very helpful for straight stitch lines, although it is not necessary for this project. Pass your needle through your first stitching hole and even out the threads. Then pass the first needle through the face or good side, pull back the thread, and pass your second needle through the same hole, making sure not to pierce that thread. Again, face needle through, pull back the thread, and then the second needle back through the same hole. And now we're going to back stitch 1.5 stitches, first needle, and our second needle back through, and 1 more half stitch. Make sure to pull those threads nice and snug. Now I'll flip this around so we can clip the threads to about 1/8 of an inch long, and then melt the ends and flatten them out into the stitch line. You just want to melt the wax in the thread and not actually burn the thread or the leather itself. We don't want these stitches to catch the cards going into the bottom card pocket, so you can use a smooth round object to really flatten them out, as they will never be seen. Now we need to stitch the right side card stop. Be sure you have the piece with the square corners on the left side and the card pocket whose top edge is lower on the left. We're going to repeat the last steps just as we did on the left side. 1 needle through, even out those threads, and then our first needle through, pull those threads back, second needle through, tighten up our stitches, and stitch down to the end. Then back stitch 1.5 stitches. And I'll flip this around, clip off the thread ends, and melt the ends. Be sure to flatten out those stitches as well. And now we're ready to add in the bottom card pockets on each side. We'll start again with the left side and add in the bottom card pocket. Make sure you use the piece of leather that matches up at the corners and the top edge matches the curve of the top card pocket. For this stitch, we're going to do this short stitch line on the side that will create a large pocket within the wallet. Starting at the top of the stitch line, you will only be stitching through a single layer of leather for the first several stitches until you reach that top card pocket. Begin in the first stitch hole and pass 1 needle through and even out your threads. Then we're ready to stitch. Face needle through first, pull the thread back and out of the way, and then the second needle through the same hole. Be sure to keep the stitches tight, but don't pull too hard and change the shape of the leather. It can also be difficult to keep those stitches straight, especially through a single layer of thin leather, so take your time. Now we'll add the top card pocket to the stitching line, making sure to keep the thread pulled tight so the edge does not lift. Now we need to add in the piece of leather for the bottom card holder. And this one we're going to add before we stitch. So I'll take this out, make sure that we completely align all the holes. And we'll continue stitching all the way to the corner. As we finish up our stitch line, now we're going to back stitch to lock in the stitching. We'll go back through the same holes for 2.5 stitches and end up with both threads on the back side of the piece. There's 1 Here's our second back stitch. Maybe I'll get that. Sometimes those threads can be a little tricky on the back stitch. And then pass that front needle through one more time so we have both threads on the back side. I'll flip this around so we can clip off those thread ends and then melt and press them into the stitch line. Let's do the same to the right side pockets. Make sure everything lines up. Even though I'm putting the top of the piece towards me so it is visible, this is the exact same process we just finished up on the left hand side. So in this case, the top of the wallet is facing me or towards me. Start in the first hole, even out our threads, and then stitch forward. We'll add in the top card pocket and then the extra piece for the bottom card pocket holder. Get to the end of our stitch line, back stitch 2.5 stitches, clip those thread ends, and melt the ends. We now have the left and right side card holders finished up. It's time to add in the inside main piece and then the outside bridle leather. Begin by taking the main inside leather piece, which should be the same color as your card pockets, and the left side card pockets that we already stitched. And we're going to line up these stitching holes. You'll notice the main piece has an extra hole on the inside, right here. And that's to help keep that edge of the leather from lifting up. We'll actually start this stitch line with a back stitch to reinforce that corner, and then go forward to the outside corner where we'll add in the piece of bridle leather that'll be the outside of our wallet. We can set that bridle leather aside for the moment. Line up our pieces, and let's get stitching. Begin by passing your needle through the third hole. That's actually the second hole on the pocket piece. And then we're going to even out our threads. And then stitch backwards to that end, locking in that corner. We'll do one more. And now we're going to keep those stitches nice and tight and stitch forward to that corner of the wallet where we'll add in our piece of bridle leather. When you're back stitching or stitching through a hole that already has thread through it, it can be difficult to get the needles through. So having a pair of pliers handy can definitely be helpful. Continue saddle stitching forward all the way to the corner where we are going to add in our outside bridle leather. Now we're going to do one more stitch into this corner hole. Pull our threads nice and tight. And now we're going to add in the outside piece of bridle leather. So these two pieces are going to go back to back. And we're going to take our backside needle from the card pockets, right there. And we're going to go through the corner hole on the back side of the bridle leather, and then pull that tight and add it to our piece. With the outside leather added, we will now consider the face side to be the outside of the wallet, as the outside stitch line will be the most visible. So I'm going to flip this around, and this is now our face side. So our first needle through will go through the bridle leather, pull that thread back and out of the way, our second needle through, and we're going to pull those threads nice and tight. Now as we add multiple layers of leather, you really want to make sure those holes are lined up. That keeps your piece nice and even, and it also helps to prevent piercing the thread with that second needle. Continue stitching forward, adding in the card pocket pieces of leather as you reach them, and making sure your stitching holes are all aligned to make the needle passing through as easy as possible. As we get to the end of the stitch line, let me flip this around to better show the extra hole in the long pieces of leather. Now the face side is on the back, so that needle comes through first. Pull that thread out of the way, second needle through. Now this stitching hole already is tied into the previous stitch line, and so it's going to be a little more difficult to get those needles through. One more stitch to hold that corner down. And then we're going to backstitch 2.5 stitches. Definitely use a pair of pliers if you need to help pull those needles through. There's one backstitch. We'll do one more and then a half. Okay, let's clip off those thread ends. Melt the threads and flatten them neatly into the stitch line. We are almost finished. One last stitch line and your wallet is complete. Just as on the left side, we're going to begin on the third stitching hole, back stitch, and then forward stitch to that outside corner where we will add in the outside bridle leather. As the outside bridle leather is already attached to the wallet, we need to make sure we keep that out of the way until we add it in that corner stitching hole. Line up those stitching holes, and we're going to again start in that third stitching hole in, even out our threads, then back stitch for 2 stitches to reinforce the corner. I didn't pull my needle quite tight enough there, so it just needed to get adjusted. Second needle through, pull those tight, one more back stitch to reinforce that pocket edge. And now we're going to just forward stitch all the way to the corner. Again, we're going to do a full stitch in that corner hole and pull those threads nice and tight. And now we're going to take this backside needle and pass it through the hole on the back side of the bridle leather. The tricky part for the rest of this stitch line is keeping the holes lined up, as the bridle leather is longer than the rest of the wallet to account for the curve radius when it folds. After a few stitches, it will hold in place and get easier to align. Keep stitching all the way to the end. In this case, it's actually a little easier with the piece to do it out of the stitching pony. And so I'm going to take it out, do these last couple stitches, and then back stitch 2.5 stitches so you have both threads on the inside of the wallet. Okay, let's clip those thread ends, melt them into the stitch line, and we are done stitching. All that's left is to sand and burnish your edges if you prefer. The edges will naturally burnish over time with use, but we can also clean them up a little right now. There are many methods to burnishing edges, and I'm going to show you one fast and easy way. Take the coarser sandpaper first to even out the layers of leather. You don't want to scratch the leather faces, just even out the edges and corners. Then use the finer sandpaper to give a nice smooth surface. When you're happy with all of your edges, then we're just going to dab a little water before we use the wax canvas to burnish and give that final shine. Now you can spend as much time on your edges as you like to get the perfect edge for you. If you have any questions, we're here to help, so don't hesitate to reach out. Our Facebook support page is a great place to find community and quick answers. We love to see what you're making, so please be sure to tag us on social media. Thank you so much for watching. From our family to yours, happy making.